Hello, and thank you for tuning into the Texas Women's Foundation podcast, Strong Women, Better Texas, where we'll discuss topics that impact the lives of women, girls, and families across our state, and how we can individually and collectively create solutions to build stronger women and create a better Texas. I'm Karen Hughes White, President and CEO of Texas Women's Foundation. Our mission is to drive meaningful social and economic change for women, girls, and families statewide by leveraging our resources to invest in research, advocacy, grant making, and leadership training to support our vision of an equitable society where women and girls can fully participate. We're kicking off this podcast with our first series, The State of Women in Texas. In this series, we'll be sounding the alarm on some of the most concerning issues and statistics about the realities facing women, girls, and families in Texas. These findings explain why Texas ranks 47th out of 50 states for women's overall economic success and well-being. How is this possible in a state with one of the largest and most robust economies in the nation? Well, stay tuned. You're about to find out. Joining me today is Kelsey Erickson Streufert, the Chief Public Affairs Officer for the Texas Restaurant Association. A licensed attorney and seasoned Texas Capitol professional, Kelsey joined TRA right before the COVID-19 pandemic, and then led efforts to safely reopen restaurant dining rooms and secured regulatory waivers for cocktails to go, something I think we're all still excited about and appreciate. She also collaborated with Texas's federal delegation to pass the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act, right? Provided a crucial lifeline for businesses nationwide. Under her leadership, TRA achieved unprecedented success during a Texas legislative session with 6 of the association's 8 priority bills passed and all opposing legislation successfully blocked. So she is a force to be reckoned with. In this episode, we're going to discuss the obstacles that families face accessing quality, affordable, accessible childcare in the state of Texas, and the vital role this has on our women and Texas families' economic security. We're going to highlight the efforts underway by groups like the Texas Restaurant Association, who are collaborating and advocating for change. So welcome, Kelsey. Hello. We're so excited you're with us today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Karen. I'm excited to be here, and you made me sound great. So let's dive right in. I'm excited.
Well, you are super impressive, and the fact that you started with the Restaurant Association right as the COVID pandemic set in is just, it's a tremendous story, right? And certainly you are no stranger to challenges. So, we just appreciate the efforts that you're making to support women and families across our state. Obviously, desperately need childcare for their children's development, for their families' economic stability, for so many reasons. One thing I know from our pre-call is you are expecting your first child. Baby Liam will be here anytime. So this issue is not only important to you professionally, but it's a personal issue as well, and something that you're grappling with and will be very soon. So you told me you started with the Texas Restaurant Association right before the pandemic, right, in March of 20. Share with us, if you will, how it all began, the initiatives that you led, and the significance of these efforts, particularly in the state of Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about jumping right into the frying pan, right?
Yes.
I tell people when I accepted the job, COVID was this thing happening in China that we were all sort of watching on the news.
Right.
And by the time I started, restaurants were in full lockdown. They could only provide food to go. And quite honestly, it was complete chaos, right? None of us knew how to respond to a global pandemic. None of us knew what protocols to follow. That was before we had the vaccines. So it was the wild, wild west. But for me professionally, it was such an amazing opportunity because it really created an opportunity and a highlight of why advocacy is important, right?
Right.
Why we all need to be involved in the policies that our government is creating, because those policies can really make all the difference in the world. And so it was an incredibly challenging time for our industry. We lost about 40% of our jobs virtually overnight.
Wow.
Which is a huge number, but it's an even bigger number when you consider the food service industry is Texas's largest private sector employer. We have about 1.4 million jobs just in Texas.
It's amazing.
So you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people losing their livelihood, in many instances losing the businesses that they built, and virtually overnight. So it was scary, it was challenging, but we are really proud as the Texas Restaurant Association that we came together and we said, we are going to lead through this challenge. We're not going to wait for others to tell us what to do. We're going to decide what the protocols should be, because at the end of the day, we're the food experts. We're the food safety experts.
Right.
So let's work with the health experts and figure out what do those policies need to be. And that's exactly what we did. We created what was known as the Texas Restaurant Promise, which was basically this set of commitments that restaurants made to their customers and employees and vice versa to create a safe dining environment, even in those early COVID days. And it was really cool to see that blueprint basically get adopted. All of a sudden, all these other states had restaurant promises. And we were working with the governor's team on the reopening protocols. And so I did jump just right into the frying pan, but with the leadership of our president and CEO, Dr. Emily Williams-Knight, and our team, I think we really found that even in those darkest days, we could protect this industry, we could grow this industry by working collaboratively together and really prioritizing the people in our industry, which is kind of what brought us into the whole childcare discussion. So we're excited to talk about that today.
Absolutely. And thank you for your work. Thank you for your leadership, right? The fearless way that you and others tackled the problem that had a huge economic impact on this state and the people that we call our neighbors and friends. And then the long-lasting impact the work has had in keeping, right, the dining experience safe and enjoyable and flexible and innovative, right, for those of us who enjoy Texas's restaurants. So let's get into our conversation. You and I had some fascinating discussions around childcare as truly an infrastructure issue, certainly for the restaurant industry, but maybe for the entire Texas economy. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about the statistics tied to women working in the restaurant industry and the fact that the majority of these women are frontline workers, right, not in leadership. So talk to us a little bit about the demographics of the industry.
Sure. So as the state's largest private sector employer, we are always struggling to find and retain enough talent to serve our growing state. And it's a challenge that restaurants face, but it's pretty much a challenge every industry in Texas faces, right? Our growth is both our best asset and our biggest challenge. And so for us as a restaurant industry, we started really thinking about what are those barriers that are preventing people from either coming to work in our industry or staying and building a career in our industry. And childcare was one of those that came up again and again. And when you look at the data, it shouldn't be a surprise, right? So 54% of our workforce is female, and 60% is under the age of 35. So you think about a lot of parents out there who need childcare.
Yeah, they're in the sweet spot of that, right?
That's right. That's right for women and working dads too. But we all know that, oftentimes women bear a lot of those responsibilities. So that's the demographics we're talking about. And then when you add in kind of the unique facets of our industry, we're not 9 to 5. It's hard to work from home for most of our positions, right? All of those factors make childcare even more difficult and inaccessible And so it just became increasingly clear to us that this was a major obstacle for our workforce and for our businesses. And so eventually you get to the point where you kind of have to ask yourself, well, what are we willing to do about it?
Right.
We know this is a problem. And we went to the Capitol last session. We sort of thought we were going to be a Me Too voice to say this is important. We support the work that others are doing. But we kind of found that there weren't a lot of proposals out there that we thought were really the right fit for our state at this time. And so that's where we had to kind of look in the mirror and say, if this is a priority for us, like it should be, then we need to come up with some solutions. We need to bring people to the table, and we need to just take a leadership role in this. And so really proud of the fact that the Texas Restaurant Association took on that role, and that this is, a priority that we're addressing in this legislative session that we started.
Well, it's important work, right? And we're grateful for you and the role, right, that Texas Restaurant Association is playing, and the work that you are leading too. So let's get into more of this discussion. So ultimately, the work that you were doing at the Texas Capitol led to the creation of a collaborative called the Employers for Childcare Task Force, or better known as E4C. So share with us more about how the task force was formed and how the impactful work this coalition is doing that is driving change across the state.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. So we teamed up. Collaboration, first of all, is the exact right word. We teamed up with a few organizations, Early Matters, which is a group that has chapters all across the state. It's business leaders, it's childcare providers, it's community members, and really addressing early childhood needs. So Early Matters, Texas Association of Business, and a group called Texas 2036, which is basically a nonpartisan, well-respected think tank in Austin. And the four of us got together and launched E4C, or the Employers for Childcare Task Force. Wouldn't be a government or public policy initiative if we didn't have an acronym, right? So E4C. And we launched that initiative really at the very end of 2023 with the idea that we would take all of 2024 to grow our coalition and really study best practices and develop an agenda that we could bring to the Texas legislature when they started their work in January 2025, which is where we are today. And so that whole year of 2024, we brought on different business leaders. We now have over 70 business members of our coalition, which we're very proud of. And we really learned, right? We're the first to say, we know how to run a restaurant. We've never run a childcare provider or a childcare center. And so we really learned. We learned from experts. We brought in experts. We looked at what other states have done. We looked at models that Texas has sort of experimented with. And we worked together to develop this blueprint, which has different priorities that we are asking the Texas legislature to consider this session. Some of those items have what's called a fiscal note, basically a cost to the state to implement, but most don't. Most are regulatory reforms and tweaks to existing programs and just getting our government agencies to talk to each other and be more collaborative, right? Some of it's kind of common sense, frankly. But what we found is this issue of childcare just hadn't gotten the attention that it needed in the past to really address some of these issues. And what we're really excited about is that's starting to change. We're talking to legislators across the political spectrum who understand that this issue is not just a nice to have or a women's issue or a family issue. It's an issue that really impacts every single Texan because, as you said, it's infrastructure. Mm-hmm. If people cannot afford to work in our state, then we cannot continue to grow and invest in our people in the way that we need to be successful. So this is one of those things that impacts every single Texan. And it's really great to see lawmakers, regardless of their political party or their politics, understand that we need to invest in childcare so we invest in our economy and in our families.
Well, we say it all the time, right? When women thrive, families thrive, Texas thrives, right? So thanks for doing the good work,
Right.
and especially for leading the collaboration. We talk a lot about, and you and I talked about, right? No one sector is going to get this done. We've got to be able
Yep.
to come together, public, private, right? Community organizations, nonprofits, employers, state agencies, to fix this, right? And to fix it on behalf of our great state of Texas with $2.4 trillion in economic output, right? If we want to remain strong and healthy, this is just an essential issue. So in the latest issue of our report, our biannual research report, The Economic Issues for Women in Texas, the report does highlight childcare as a significant barrier to women's economic stability, right? With cost and access being a major factor, right? On a cost perspective, on average, infant childcare, and I'm telling you this, you're living this, right? Infant childcare costs exceed $9,300 annually, which is nearly the price of a full year's tuition at a state college. It's unbelievable. And as you and I talked about yesterday, the math doesn't math on this, right?
Nope.
The math doesn't math. So how do you see this issue affecting the women and the families that you advocate for?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll use myself as an example, right? You mentioned I'm pregnant. I'm basically 9 months pregnant at this point. So I'm glad to be here today and that Liam didn't come a little early. But no, it's a huge financial struggle for families. So my husband and I, we're going to pay $1,900 a month for infant care in Austin, Texas. So
That is
that's higher than the
unbelievable.
average.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely. It's a huge cost. And I just think about how blessed we are that, we have full-time jobs with good benefits. And so that's something that we're able to make work. It's not going to be easy by any means, but we're able to make it work. And we have health care. And, on a personal note, we actually had to go through fertility treatments. So we paid out of pocket for all of those expenses. And then you think about childcare on top of that, that's completely inaccessible for many, many Texas families out there. And they are having to make choices about, do I have a child or not? And if there's two parents in that household, does one of those parents leave the workforce temporarily because the math doesn't math, as you said?
Right.
And especially if you're talking about two or more children in childcare, if there's a two-parent household, the economic numbers almost always dictate that the sort of logical thing to do would be for one of those parents to come out of the workforce. And the sad thing about that, right, is not only is that family losing out on that income and that choice, frankly, for that period of time, but we know from the data that especially when we're talking about women making that choice and stepping back from the workforce, that has repercussions on their lifetime earnings. That has repercussions on where they will eventually sort of take their career and the executive leadership positions that they'll be offered or not. And so we're leaving families with really unfair and problematic choices is how I would describe it. And so it's something that we really need to take not only a hard look at, but we really need to start adopting policies that are going to have an impact for the better. And cost is a big part of it because right now, childcare is expensive. We're going to do some things to hopefully make it less expensive, but it's always going to be expensive to a degree, right? You're talking about people taking care of infants and toddlers. So you want to make sure that it's safe and you have qualified people and that these children are getting an education. They're not just being sort of babysat, but they're really developing in those really critical early years. So that's expensive. And right now, it's basically families and childcare providers who are bearing that cost almost exclusively.
Right.
And so that's where we're looking for the business community to step in, not because of mandates or heavy-handed policies, but because we want to create incentives and tools and resources for them to do that. And then hopefully the government can step in and play a role too. And with all of these people coming to the table, as you mentioned before, philanthropy, private business, government, and that's what it's going to take, is for everyone coming to the table and playing a role so that we can expand access to affordable quality childcare.
Well, and again, reframing it as an infrastructure issue, right?
Yep.
That supports our rich and robust Texas economy, I think is a brilliant strategic move. And hopefully it elevates the conversation further, right? And has more people thinking about this in that way. Now, recent report from a national organization called Moms First, right? We're all excited about the work Moms First is doing nationally, but they talked about childcare as a crisis and pushing families, 55% of American families, into debt, right? And that, again, it's untenable, right? And as we've discussed, right, efforts are underway to support these families through tax cuts for childcare expenses. But can you share more about these initiatives and how you believe they could benefit families, not only in Texas, but across the country?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not surprised to see those numbers from Moms First. You made the comparison to undergraduate college tuition, right? Yeah. And I think about all of the programs and policies we have in place to address college affordability, right? There's guaranteed tuition plans, there's tax favorable investment accounts you can set up from the moment your child is born. Yeah. There's policies around tuition freezes and scholarships and all of this infrastructure to make college more affordable. Well, parents paying for college have at least 17, 18 years to prepare and save for that investment.
You've got 9 months.
You have maybe 9 months to prepare for childcare. And yet they're basically the same expense, right? So I think that just goes to show sort of the infrastructure that's lacking around childcare. Now, to your point, we're hoping to change that, right? So some of the things we're looking at here in Texas as part of the E4C blueprint include resources and tools and incentives for employers to have some skin in the game. We hear from employers all the time, large and small, all across the state. We want to do more in the childcare space, but we don't really know where to start, right? We're not childcare experts. Right. It's a highly regulated industry, as it should be. And so how can we help these employers help their employees? So some of our ideas are as simple as the Texas Workforce Commission, which is an agency that has a lot of childcare oversight already. Let's have them create a website that's a one-stop shop for employers so they can find best practices, they can find resources, they can find templates, they can find information about existing federal, state, and local programs that help with childcare affordability. Let's put all that in one place, make it free, make it easy for businesses to find, right? Simple, no cost, helps move us down the line. Then we have ideas like tax credits. Could we tell employers, if you can make an investment in your employees' childcare, whether that's through some kind of on-site childcare or just simply an employee benefit where you give your employees a certain amount of money and they take that and use that at the childcare provider of their choice. If you as a business can make some kind of commitment like that, then can the state offset that expense for the business by providing a franchise tax credit? That's something that's going to be really helpful for businesses like restaurants, which run on such thin margins, right? They don't have a lot of extra capital, especially right now in this inflationary environment, to invest in things like employee benefits, but they want to. So if you can give them a way to do it that's easy, and then give them an opportunity to recoup at least some of that cost, that's where we're going to start to see some magic. That's where we're going to see some partnership that really helps employees access this care that they so desperately need.
Well, and that becomes a win-win-win, right? For the state, for the employer, for the employees. Now, a challenge we haven't talked about yet, right, is access, right? We know that more than half of Texans live in a childcare desert, right? They actually don't have access to quality childcare. We know the issues around access, right, and affordability, right, is costing Texas $11.4 billion with a B dollars annually in lost economic output. So, do you think the significant economic impact is helping to drive some stronger interest and is helping to prioritize policy changes to support families with childcare issues?
Absolutely. Those numbers are startling, and they should serve as a wake up call, frankly. I think the other thing that's helpful is we are seeing states that Texas competes with for jobs and infrastructure projects. They are making huge investments in childcare. So when you talk about our competitiveness as a state for people to relocate here, expand their headquarters here, even just the other day, there was the announcement about all of the AI companies and build outs that are going to be happening here, right? None of that can happen if families can't afford to work in Texas. So I think you're starting to see lawmakers, regardless of their politics, make that connection between not investing in this area is going to cost us elsewhere, right? So I'm so glad you brought up access because it's probably the trickiest challenge to solve for in this space. But until we do, we're always going to have issues with affordability and quality and all of these other challenges. Because if you don't have enough slots, then it's hard to make sure that those slots are affordable or high quality, right?
Right.
And so one thing we're looking at E4C to address that challenge is what we're calling innovation grants. There was a great program out of Fort Worth. They took some of their COVID-19 dollars that they received from the federal government, and an organization called Child Care Associates, or CCA, partnered with Mayor Maddie Parker, who's been a huge champion for childcare in the Fort Worth area, a mom herself, so she does a great job of really speaking to this issue on a personal and professional level. But they took some of those COVID dollars and they created a local grant program. And the basic idea was, let's talk to employers and find out what the unique local workforce needs are in terms of childcare. Then let's take existing high-quality childcare providers who we already know are doing a good job, right? Let's pair the two with some investment resources so that those existing high-quality providers can expand their services to meet those local needs. And we're now looking at, can we take that model that we know works, we've got some good data from it, and can we do a similar thing in several communities across the state? And someone called it an incubator program the other day, and I thought that was brilliant, right? Let's incubate the good ideas, let's see what works, and most importantly, let's create more seats in that process, which will help us with these other issues of affordability and quality.
Well, I think it's tremendous, right? The opportunity to learn from a pilot or an incubator like that, and then to work to refine it and then replicate it across the state. I mean, these are great steps in the right direction. As we delve further into policy changes, the 89th legislative session is now underway, right there in Austin. What would you consider a real meaningful victory for childcare during this session?
It's a great question. There's two things that really come to my mind. One is the state of Texas really does not invest any state dollars in childcare today. Pretty much all of our programming is funded by federal dollars that come through the state and are passed down to the local workforce boards. So if we could change that dynamic and have the state invest in childcare in some way, there's lots of different ideas about how to do it, but just simply getting the state to make an investment is a huge first step. So I would count any state dollars as a huge win that we should all celebrate and that we should build upon, right? So that wouldn't be the end, but it would be a great foundation for this evolution. And then the second thing is really kind of that same theme of building a foundation. We really came into this session with childcare being an issue that was on people's radar, but if you weren't, if you didn't have kids or know someone with young kids, it just wasn't front of mind. I think that's now changing. And so we need to just continue to build on that momentum and really, as we've talked about, beat that drum of childcare is infrastructure that impacts every single Texan. And so this needs to be something that we look at every session, just like we look at public education funding every session. We look at transportation funding every session, right? That kind of precedent would be a huge victory for this movement moving forward.
Well, couldn't agree with you more, right? And I think it's so interesting to be able to elevate the conversation in the wake of so much growth here in Texas, right? Some of the statistics that came out of our own research is the number of women that have joined the Texas workforce over the last 10 years, over 1 million women, what they're doing to drive both growth and innovation. We're an essential part of the Texas workforce, and we are driving against that economic strength that we love to talk about, right, as sort of the strongest economy in the nation, to retain that while we've achieved it, right? And we continue to grow, attracting new employers, right, the new data centers here in Dallas, right? The key is how we're going to keep them, right? And if we don't address...
That's right.
Right? I mean, it's one thing to get them here. It's another thing to keep them running and succeeding. So, it's just a huge issue. And I love that it's been elevated in the way that it has. And E4C has such a huge role in that. So, given your expertise and your insight, what advice would you give to businesses and others listening to our podcast today on how they can support women and families who are facing challenges with childcare?
Yeah, first and foremost, please join us. If you are a business leader, if you are an individual business, if you're a business association like a chamber of commerce, as long as you are not directly involved in the business of childcare, please join E4C. It is free to join, and we want to have as many people be part of this tent, part of this effort as possible. We've already got oil and gas industry, hospital, small business, right? Our economy is so big and diverse. We need that representation. So please be part of the conversation. And frankly, please signal to your employees that this matters to you as a business by being part of the movement, right? I think that's really important. It's just showing your workforce we're putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak, and we're going to be part of this effort. And so that's first and foremost. Second is follow along this legislative session. It's a really important one. It only lasts 140 days, so it is fast and furious. But as I sort of started this conversation talking about COVID, it is so important to be part of the policymaking process. At the TRA, we say if you're not on the table, you're on the menu, right? So make sure that you are an active participant in your government. And then lastly, I would say there's a group called Best Places for Working Parents, was actually started in Fort Worth and it's gone national. Great organization with resources. If you're a business and you're thinking about how do I address childcare with my workforce? Where do I start? What are some, affordable ways that I can be a better employer? They have a lot of great tools and resources that you can tap into. So that's a great place to look as well.
Well, that is incredible guidance for businesses that are tuned in and our listeners. Kelsey, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your insight, your guidance, and especially your passion for this issue. We appreciate you so much. We appreciate the work that you're leading at TRA and the role that you're taking with E4C. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for having me. I promise I was passionate about this issue before I was pregnant, but maybe I'm even more passionate about it now. So thank you for the work you're leading at Texas Women's Foundation, and thank you again for having me.
Well, we wish you the best of luck and look forward to learning about baby Liam's arrival. So we hope you will stay in touch with us. We invite you all to learn more about Texas Women's Foundation's research by going to our website. It's txwf.org/research. There you'll find ways that you can engage, ways you can share our messages on social media, and ways to support and engage in our mission. Heartfelt thanks to Kelsey for joining us today and for sharing her valuable insights on the childcare issues here in Texas, her efforts in rallying and organizing supporters, offering us ways to advocate for these issues that are so critical for women and families in our state. We are grateful, very grateful for the work that she's doing. We are grateful for the support from the Dodie Frost Crockett Endowment, which is funding this podcast. Dodie has been a longtime friend and supporter of Texas Women's Foundation. Her contributions to our mission support the work that we're doing today to share these insights with a broader audience, to build a movement of champions for change. I'd also like to thank our partners at ISP Creative for helping us put this together. They're the behind-the-scenes magic. Now, make sure you tune in to hear more about the state of women in Texas in our upcoming episodes that will be released weekly. You can find them on our website, txwf.org, and on social media at Texas Women's FDN, along with ways to support our mission. Thank you for joining us as we work together to build strong women, better Texas.